told to remove black man. His hoodie or get off. He bought 49% of the airline an hour later. A flight can seem ordinary until a single moment transforms it into something unforgettable. Picture a routine trip abruptly turned upside down because of a hooded sweatshirt and a biased demand from someone drunk on authority. This isn't just another traveling horror story. It's about a spark that ignited when a passenger refused to bow to discrimination. A man wearing a simple hoodie became the catalyst for a showdown that shook an entire airline. From the cramped aisle to corporate boardrooms, from whispered prejudices to bold public action, this story will prove how one person's stance can alter the course of countless lives. Marcus Avery's day began the way many of his days did. He rose early in his Los Angeles penthouse, attended to emails from his investment fund, then prepared to travel to Atlanta for a meeting about a new technology startup. An impeccably timed schedule was his trademark. He believed in organization and efficiency, from the cut of his suits down to the seconds he allowed himself for morning coffee. Marcus enjoyed traveling, but what he loved more than anything else was seizing opportunities. He wasn't just a man with money to burn. He was a man with a passion for leveling the playing field. Little did he know that his flight on Delta Airlines that afternoon would lead him to face a level of discrimination he'd never before encountered so blatantly, and that he would soon orchestrate an earth-shaking response. He arrived at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, early, wearing a simple hoodie over jeans and sneakers. His style was typically a blend of comfortable streetwear and understated luxury. For him, a hoodie was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a nod to his humble beginnings in inner-city Chicago, a place he'd left behind financially, though not spiritually. He'd learned early on that appearances could be deceiving. Success can wear a tailored suit or a plain sweatshirt. Marcus breezed through the first-class check-in counter, greeting the employees politely. Nobody questioned his attire or asked for proof that he belonged in that line. At this point in his life, he was used to traveling first class. The staff, of course, saw that distinctive boarding pass Delta One. They smiled. He smiled back. In those fleeting moments, he believed it would be an uneventful flight. He settled into his seat near the front of the plane. The interior of Delta's Boeing 767 felt simultaneously cool and cavernous, with plush seats aligned across a broad fuselage. He was early enough that flight attendants were still chatting among themselves. Flight pre-check announcements were a half-hour away. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman scrolled through her phone. Behind him, a young family tried to calm a toddler before takeoff. Up front, a flight attendant named Hillary, tall and sharply dressed in the airline's signature navy uniform, glanced occasionally in Marcus's direction. A frown tightened the corners of her mouth. Marcus noticed her stare, but he tried not to assume anything negative. People stared for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes they recognized him from a magazine feature covering young African-American entrepreneurs. Sometimes they just noticed a 6'2" man who carried himself with quiet confidence. He pulled out his phone, planning to answer a few last-minute emails before stowing it away. Moments later, Hillary walked over. Her expression was measured, but beneath that professional veneer, there was a flicker of something uneasy. She spoke quietly, but her tone had an edge. "Sir," she said, "I'm going to need you to remove that hoodie." Marcus looked up, entirely unsure he'd heard her correctly. "I'm sorry." "The hoodie," she repeated, as though explaining something painfully obvious. "It's not appropriate attire for the first-class cabin. We have a certain dress code here." Marcus blinked, confused. Delta Airlines, to his knowledge, had no official dress code for paying passengers. especially not one targeting something as benign as a hoodie. I'm not aware of any dress code, he replied. And I travel in hoodies all the time. Hillary's mouth tightened further. This is first class. It's a refined space. We ask all passengers to respect that. She stood there, arms folded, waiting. Another flight attendant, a young man named Eduardo, glanced over, looking nervous. Marcus could sense the tension. Something about Hillary's stance felt like more than a simple request. There was a judgment in her eyes he'd seen before in less genteel settings. "I'm comfortable," Marcus said, trying to keep the situation calm. "I've never had a problem with this. I'll be quiet and respectful. If there is an airline rule I'm violating, can you show me?" Hillary drew in a quick breath. "Sir, if you're going to argue with me, I'll have to ask you to leave." Marcus's heart pounded. This was a blatant intrusion on personal choice, no more than that it felt like she was targeting him. He tried to keep his voice level. "I'm not arguing. I'm asking for clarification." "It's a simple request," she said curtly. Marcus felt eyes turning toward them. People in first class began to peer around headrests and phone screens. This was exactly the type of confrontation he hated. He'd worked too hard to earn his place in the world, to have to justify his clothing. He also knew that direct confrontation often escalated quickly. So he took a breath, reached down, and pulled off the hoodie. Beneath it, he wore a black t-shirt. He was already regretting giving in, but he decided not to push the envelope, at least not yet. He was scheduled for important meetings in Atlanta, and the last thing he needed was a forced removal from the flight or an arrest for refusing to comply. The stories he'd seen on the news about passengers being escorted off planes for refusing seat changes or minor disputes flashed through his mind. Hillary gave him a curt nod and walked away triumphant. Marcus stared after her. Suddenly, the flight felt claustrophobic. He remembered the earliest days of his success, back when people sometimes asked him if he was lost whenever he strolled into a swanky hotel or private function. He had often responded with a courteous grin, biting his tongue, because he didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing him ruffled. Eduardo, the young flight attendant, caught Marcus's eye and offered a fleeting, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm new here." "She's just strict." Marcus nodded, not wanting to drag the younger attendant into any drama. The plane continued boarding. Executives in suits slid into seats. A fashion influencer snapped selfies in the bulkhead row. A mother pinned a blanket around a toddler. Marcus pretended to focus on his phone. Inside, his tension simmered. Yet the worst was still to come. All seemed to proceed smoothly, albeit with an uncomfortable undercurrent of tension. The cabin door was sealed. Safety announcements commenced. Hillary's voice, clipped and officious, rattled through the cabin speakers. She barely looked in Marcus's direction. Maybe that was the end of it, Marcus thought. He tried to put the incident behind him. He had pressing business to finalize once the flight landed in Atlanta. But about 15 minutes after takeoff, Hillary approached again. Her footsteps were purposeful, and the set of her jaw indicated she was not finished. Marcus was still in his seatbelt fastened, browsing the airline's Wi-Fi to send a few emails. The seatbelt sign had just switched off, so passengers began to settle in. He glanced up to see her standing beside him, arms crossed, a look that made his stomach drop. "Sir," she began curtly, "the captain would like a word. Please follow me to the front galley." Marcus frowned, heart pounding. "Is there an issue?" Hillary's eyes flicked to the overhead bin, then back to him. "We need to have a conversation about your attire and your attitude. It's best we do it out of earshot of other passengers." Marcus hesitated. 100 scenarios flooded his mind. Some humiliating, others infuriating. Still, he had no intention of causing a scene. Slowly, he unbuckled and stood. The murmur of curiosity rippled around him from other first-class travelers. A few eyebrows rose. Most tried not to stare too obviously. He followed Hillary to the galley, where a towering figure in a pilot's uniform stood with his arms folded. Captain Robert Harris, as read on his nameplate. He had a fatherly face lined with decades of flight experience, but it was tightened with concern. Another flight attendant, a woman in her 50s named Teresa, hovered a few paces away. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, trying not to let nerves seep into his voice. Captain Harris cleared his throat. "I understand there's been a disagreement about dress code." Marcus's gaze flicked from Hillary to the captain. "I wasn't aware Delta had a dress code for passengers. I complied when asked to remove my hoodie, even though it didn't seem like a fair request." "What's the problem now?" Hillary spoke before Captain Harris could respond. "Your manner was hostile, and you questioned my authority. That puts me and everyone else on edge." Marcus felt his temper flare. "Hostile? Because I asked for clarification. I didn't raise my voice or refuse your request." Captain Harris lifted a palm in a calming gesture. "Let's keep our voices down. We're at cruising altitude, and we need to maintain a peaceful environment for all passengers. Hillary told me you refused to follow basic instructions. Is that correct?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "With all due respect, no. That's not correct. She asked me to remove my hoodie, and I did. Nothing else happened." Hillary's face hardened. "He only complied after I threatened to have him removed. And the way he stared me down afterward was completely inappropriate." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. This was edging dangerously close to a false accusation, something that could escalate swiftly if not handled carefully. He opened them again, focusing on the captain. "Sir, I've traveled in first class many times. I have never been asked to remove a hoodie before. I've done nothing to cause disruption. If you want me off the plane, let's be direct about it." Captain Harris rubbed his temple. He appeared genuinely troubled. "We're in the air. I'd prefer if everyone calmed down and followed the rules." "What rules are those?" Marcus pressed gently, aware his voice might sound tense. "Is there a policy about hoodies?" "Because I've never heard of it." "Teresa." The older flight attendant cleared her throat. "Not an official one, but sometimes we remind first-class passengers to maintain a certain standard." She spoke gently, as though trying to soothe. Her eyes flicked to Hillary with caution, but Hillary's expression remained ice-cold. Marcus gave a short laugh. "And that standard excludes hoodies. This is a modern world, folks. People wear them on business trips all the time." Hillary leaned in. "I told you if you're going to take an attitude, we will remove you from the plane at our next stop." Captain Harris seemed to sense the tension. "All right, let's just—" But Hillary cut him off. "As the lead flight attendant on this aircraft, I have the authority to deplane a passenger if I feel they are a threat or refusing to comply with instructions." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I haven't threatened anyone. I removed my hoodie. Is there something else I need to do to satisfy you?" The captain looked from Hillary to Marcus. "Let me be clear. We can't force a passenger to disembark without a valid reason. However, if Hillary believes you're causing a disturbance," Marcus held his breath, attempting to quell his rising anger. "I want to speak directly to a supervisor or to your higher-ups when we land. This is humiliating. I'm a paying passenger. Hillary's eyes narrowed, but Captain Harris raised a hand, addressing Marcus calmly. Let's keep you in your seat. I don't see any reason for an escalation right now. But please, no more confrontations. We have a long flight ahead to Atlanta. Marcus bit back a retort. He turned and trudged back to his seat, noticing how passengers averted their gazes. Nobody wanted to be caught eavesdropping, but it was clear they all had. He sank into his seat, heart racing. He knew this wasn't over. Hillary was gunning for him for whatever reason. He felt singled out, belittled, judged. Anger seethed beneath his calm exterior. He was used to subtle discrimination, but this felt brazen. He tried to focus on reading, or at least pretend to. The flight might be long, but he was determined not to let this woman or her misguided sense of authority ruin his day. If she tried anything more, he'd be ready. For the next hour, Marcus tried to distract himself with an e-book about leadership strategies. The plane soared across the vast American landscape, leaving behind the urban sprawl of Los Angeles. Flight attendants began meal service. Eduardo approached Marcus, offering him a beverage. Would you like something to drink, sir? We have orange juice, sparkling water, wine. Just water, please, Marcus murmured, forcing a polite smile. Eduardo nodded, then leaned closer, voice hushed. I'm really sorry about all that. Marcus appreciated the gesture. Thank you, he replied softly. It's not your fault. Eduardo pulled away quickly, returning moments later with a glass of water and the meal tray. The lunch smelled delicious braised chicken with vegetables. Marcus tried to relax, focusing on the meal. However, he couldn't ignore Hillary prowling up and down the aisle, an eagle-eyed sentinel, ready to pounce on any excuse to reprimand him. Eventually, she stopped near Marcus. Instead of speaking to him, she whispered something to Eduardo. The young flight attendant's face paled. He glanced at Marcus, then back to Hillary, nodding nervously. Marcus caught none of the words, but the tension was unmistakable. Soon the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be experiencing some mild turbulence over the Rockies. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Marcus swallowed his last bite of chicken, preparing for the jostling. Sure enough, the plane began to tremor. Drinks rattled on trays. Overhead bins shook faintly. Passengers who'd been in the aisle hurried to their seats. The flight attendants suspended further service, quickly securing carts. Marcus steadied his water glass. Suddenly, Hillary's voice cut through the cabin, sharp and commanding. Sir, in seat 3C, secure your tray, now! She was looking directly at Marcus, though his tray was already locked in position. Her tone was laced with impatience and a note of condescension. Marcus swallowed his frustration. He forced himself to nod. It's already secure, he said, lifting his hands in a placating gesture. She walked on, but cast another glance back at him. It felt like she was searching for the slightest misstep. The plane continued to buck through the turbulent air. Minutes felt like hours. Marcus closed his eyes, longing for an uneventful remainder of the flight. However, as soon as the turbulence subsided and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Hillary returned to Marcus's row. This time, a middle-aged man in a crisp polo shirt was on his feet, heading toward the lavatory. He stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Hillary stopped at Marcus's side, her tone hushed yet urgent. Sir, you are continuing to disregard instructions. You didn't properly secure your tray table, and you were on your phone during turbulence. A spark of indignation lit behind Marcus's eyes. I locked my tray. My phone was in airplane mode. Are you actually watching me, hoping to catch some wrongdoing? She folded her arms. I'm simply ensuring all passengers abide by safety measures. You're giving me nothing but attitude. I suggest you watch your tone. Marcus took a deep breath. He could feel the tension in his chest. This woman was determined to provoke him. A part of him wanted to calmly ask for her name, employee ID, and file a complaint the moment they landed. Another part of him wanted to push back right there, letting her know he wouldn't stand for false accusations. But he was aware that the slightest perceived aggression on his part could be twisted against him. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I followed instructions. If you feel otherwise, then please have your co-worker or the captain confirm. Because I've been nothing but compliant." I removed my hoodie. I locked my tray. My phone is on airplane mode. Hillary's eyes blazed. "You're done. I've had enough." She turned and strode to the front of the plane. Marcus heard a faint click as she picked up the phone that allowed her to speak directly to the cockpit. Time slowed. Passengers were looking now. No one even pretended to avert their gaze. Whispers spread through the cabin. Anxiety rippled in Marcus's stomach. He heard her say, "Captain, I need to inform you we have a passenger who refuses to comply with multiple instructions. For the safety and comfort of everyone on board, I believe we should remove him from the flight as soon as we can." Marcus's jaw dropped. This was a direct threat. A wave of shock and anger washed over him. On the overhead speaker, Captain Harris's voice came through, softly, presumably responding to Hillary. She nodded, placed the phone back in its cradle, and marched to Marcus's seat. She lowered her voice, but her words were crisp and unyielding. "We will be diverting to Denver International. When we land, you will deplane. I've already notified airport security." Marcus inhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. You're risking all these passengers' time, the airline's schedule, and for what?" "Because you don't like my hoodie." Her lips curled. "This is not about the hoodie anymore. It's about your insubordination and the threat you pose." Other passengers began to object, some shaking their heads, others muttering curses under their breath. A tall man in a business suit stood up 2 rows behind. "This is insane," he called out. "He hasn't done a thing. I've been watching the whole time. He's just sitting there minding his business." Hillary shot the businessman a fierce glare. "Sit down, sir, or we'll have you removed as well." The man slowly sank back into his seat, outraged. Marcus realized the tension was at a boiling point. He needed to think. He'd seen enough viral stories to know the outcome could be disastrous if they diverted and forcibly removed him. There could be legal ramifications, public humiliation, or worse. But was he supposed to just stand by and let it happen? He glanced at the airline's Wi-Fi portal on his phone. He still had access. In a swift, decisive move, he opened a direct channel to his personal assistant, Lily Patterson, who was always on call. Through text messages, he updated her about the situation. Marcus to Lily. Being threatened was for removal from Delta flight. Racist FA. Need immediate contact with Delta corporate, possibly legal counsel. This is urgent. Seconds later, Lily responded. Lily, on it. Try to remain calm. We'll get corporate on the line ASAP. Marcus's heart hammered. He wasn't a man who enjoyed pulling rank or causing scenes. But this was beyond personal. It was a matter of principle. He deserved to be treated with the same respect as any paying customer. The fact that the flight attendant was brandishing her authority, so flagrantly cloaked in prejudice, infuriated him. He looked up to see Hillary still glaring at him, triumphant. Marcus's anger threatened to rise, but he forced it down. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He was determined to fight back. Delta's Boeing 767 dipped toward Denver International Airport. The seatbelt sign came on once again. Whispers swirled like a storm cloud through the cabin. Passengers glared at Hillary, but she kept her head high. A pair of flight attendants quietly finished securing everything for landing, while Hillary busied herself printing out a small stack of papers, likely some form of incident documentation. Marcus stared out the window, frustration boiling. His phone vibrated against his leg. He risked a quick glance, ignoring the seatbelt sign that told him to stow electronic devices. Lily's text flashed, Lily corporate rep, outraged. They want names, flight number, details. They're contacting the pilot directly. Also, your legal team is on standby, if needed. Marcus exhaled, allowing a kernel of relief to settle within him. At least the higher-ups at Delta were aware of the developing fiasco. Perhaps they'd contact the flight deck before this whole mess escalated further. Yet as the ground neared, it seemed the pilot was committed to the diversion. He'd see for himself soon enough if corporate wanted him to proceed. The landing was smooth. The entire first-class section sat in stunned silence. Marcus had never felt so singled out, so under siege. He felt the wheels screech against the runway, the flaps adjusting to slow the plane, the engines whining as they braked. When the plane finally taxied to a remote gate, tension weighed like an anvil in the cabin. Within minutes, a pair of security officers boarded. They marched down the aisle and stopped at Marcus's seat. One was a woman short but with a sturdy frame. The other was a lanky man with a badge that read, Denver Airport Police. Hillary stood behind them, her arms crossed. "Sir," said the woman officer, "please gather your belongings and come with us. We have received a report from the cabin crew that you refused to follow instructions." Marcus slowly unbuckled his seatbelt, feeling eyes on him from every direction. He stood, meeting the woman officer's gaze. "I have followed every instruction. This is a misunderstanding. But I'll cooperate." As Marcus gathered his carry-on, Eduardo appeared with sorrow etched on his face. "Sir, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't want any of this." Marcus nodded gently, not wanting to risk any more confrontation. The man behind him in the business suit spoke again, voice trembling with anger. "This is outrageous. I'll be filing a complaint on your behalf, sir." Another woman in first class piped up. "Same here." In the face of this unexpected support, Marcus felt a surge of warmth despite the humiliating predicament. He thanked them quietly and followed the officers down the aisle. Economy class passengers craned their necks, confusion etched on their faces. Some took pictures with their phones. He stepped off the plane into the jet bridge, where more police awaited, along with a Delta representative who looked thoroughly harried. Once inside the terminal, the Delta representative, a balding man named James Sutter, tried to speak, but the police insisted on taking Marcus aside first. They ushered him to a nearby seating area, away from the main thoroughfare. They asked him to wait while they sorted out the details. Marcus sat, fists clenched, mind racing. Hillary emerged moments later, handing over her incident report. Marcus watched as she spoke quietly with the officers. He glanced around for the pilot, but Captain Harris was conspicuously absent, probably still in the cockpit or dealing with other details. James Sutter was on his cell phone looking flustered. Marcus's own phone buzzed again. "Lily. Lily, hang tight. Corporate is furious with the flight attendant. They want you back on that plane or on another immediately. They're talking to Denver airport authorities now." Marcus inhaled deeply, forcing himself to remain calm. Something told him a twist was about to occur. Sure enough, minutes later, James Sutter approached him, phone in hand. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. The officers hovered nearby. Mr. Avery James began softly. "I've spoken with Delta's corporate headquarters in Atlanta. They've requested that local management here in Denver handle this situation with the utmost urgency and respect. If it's all right with you, we'd like to discuss your options. You are not under arrest." He glanced at the officers. The woman officer nodded, stepping back. "We only act on what the airline requested. If they withdraw the complaint, we have no reason to hold him." James cleared his throat. "That's correct. We're dropping any formal request to have you removed. In fact, they'd like to rebook you on the next flight to Atlanta, or if you prefer, you can continue on the same plane, though that might involve some staffing changes." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Staffing changes?" James grimaced. "We, might have to replace the lead flight attendant if you decide to reboard that particular aircraft. The pilot is on the phone with corporate as we speak." A swirl of emotions churned in Marcus's mind. Relief, vindication, but also residual anger. "What if I have another idea?" he asked quietly. James blinked. "Name it, sir." "We're willing to accommodate you in any way possible." Marcus studied James's anxious eyes. He wasn't going to let them off that easy. This was bigger than just getting to Atlanta. A statement had to be made. "I want every detail of this incident documented. The name of the flight attendant, a formal apology in writing from your CEO." And he paused, letting the tension build. "I'd like to have a conversation with your top brass, including your CFO, about potential investments. Today." James's eyes widened. I can pass along that request, but sir, that might be difficult on such short notice." Marcus nodded calmly. "Then they'll have to find a way. Because I was humiliated on this airline, not just humiliated, publicly targeted. I want to ensure that something like this never happens again, and I have the means to make a difference in how Delta does business." James swallowed. "I understand, Mr. Avery. Let me speak with them. Could you possibly wait in the Sky Club lounge while we figure this out?" Marcus gave a curt nod. The police officers dispersed after James informed them that the airline had reversed its stance. Marcus walked with James toward the Delta Sky Club, ignoring the stares of passers-by. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins. If Hillary had intended to break him or shame him, she'd just ignited a fuse that could change both of their lives forever. As Marcus rode the escalator to the Sky Club, memories of his youth in Chicago flickered through his mind. He remembered the playground fights, the scrawny bullies, the teachers who dismissed his potential. Born into a neighborhood where prospects were slim, he had been told in countless ways, both subtle and overt, that he didn't belong in spaces of luxury or influence. Yet he refused to stay in the narrow lanes others prescribed for him. Hard work. A brilliant mind for finance and a fierce determination had propelled him through college, through business school, into a world of angel investing and venture capitalism. Success had not shielded him from prejudice. It had merely changed the venues in which he encountered it, like an upscale restaurant that once refused to seat him until they realized he had a reservation, or a high-end boutique that tried to steer him away from the more expensive suits. Each incident fueled his determination to buy property, buy stocks, buy companies, until he had enough leverage to rewrite the rules. Now confronted yet again with that same poisonous prejudice in the supposedly rarefied air of first-class travel, Marcus felt something crack within him, a final straw. He was no longer the quietly seething man he'd been in his 20s. He was in a position to force real systemic change if he chose to wield his power. He sank into a plush chair in the private lounge, an oasis of marble counters, panoramic windows and softly humming business travelers. James disappeared to make calls and coordinate. Marcus connected to the lounge Wi-Fi and scheduled an urgent Zoom meeting with Lily and another key member of his legal team, Angela Park. Within minutes, his phone chimed with their faces on screen. Lily, pale-haired and composed, spoke first, her voice laced with concern. "Marcus, are you all right?" "I'm fine," he replied softly. "Just angry." Angela, the no-nonsense attorney who had stood by Marcus's side during many corporate negotiations, leaned forward, her expression grim. "This is blatant discrimination. We have grounds for a lawsuit. If you want to pursue legal action, we can. But I suspect your mind is already on something bigger." Marcus nodded. "You know me too well. I'm not looking for a mere apology or settlement check. I want to change the system from within. I want a seat at the table, maybe even buy a chunk of the airline's stock. Enough to force policy overhauls, better training, better accountability." Angela's eyes gleamed. "We can do that. Delta is a publicly traded company. We can purchase a significant stake if you're serious. The question is, how large a stake are we talking?" Marcus folded his arms. 49%. Enough to be the largest minority shareholder, but not to trigger a full takeover. I want to send a message. Lily exhaled in surprise. "That's enormous. You have the funds, but it'll be complicated, and you'll need board approval for certain thresholds. This won't be an immediate transaction." Angela nodded in agreement. "The financial logistics will be staggering, but if you're determined, we can start the process. Just be aware, it could spike the stock price once word leaks out that you're buying in." Marcus stared out the window, where planes taxied under the Denver sun. "I don't care about the short-term cost. I'll figure it out. I'm calling in some big favors, maybe even a few partners. This might become a consortium purchase." Lily whistled softly. "This is huge, Marcus." He looked back at them. So was that flight attendant's arrogance. People who think they can wield that kind of prejudice in public spaces are in for a wake-up call. "I'm meeting with Delta Brass soon. I want you both on standby." Angela's face broke into a steely smile. "Ready when you are." With that, Marcus ended the call, feeling the first wave of satisfaction since the ordeal began. He had no idea if he could push such a massive deal through in a matter of hours, but he would try. He'd done the impossible before. At the very least, he wanted to make a statement so loud that airlines worldwide would rethink their training on diversity and inclusion. About an hour later, James Sutter reappeared, drenched in sweat, despite the controlled lounge climate. He signaled Marcus over to a private conference room in the corner of the Sky Club. Marcus followed, head-high posture, calm. Inside, a large screen flickered to life, revealing 3 faces from Delta's corporate offices in Atlanta. One was Vanessa Jones, Vice President of Customer Experience, whose half-moon glasses and graying hair gave her a kindly schoolteacher vibe. Next to her was Doug Campbell, CFO, with slicked-back hair and a rigid collar. The third face belonged to Regina Carter, the airline's general counsel. She wore a serious expression and had the immaculate posture of a seasoned lawyer. Mr. Avery Vanessa began a brittle smile on her lips. "On behalf of Delta Airlines, we extend our sincere apologies. We were just briefed on the full situation. We want you to know this is not how we expect our passengers to be treated." Marcus nodded curtly. "I appreciate the apology, but I'm beyond apologies at this point." Doug cleared his throat. "Of course. We'd like to offer you compensation, perhaps a free first-class ticket to any international destination or a year of complimentary Delta Sky Club membership. The flight attendant in question has been removed from duty, pending a full investigation. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. I already have lifetime lounge membership and I can buy my own tickets. This goes deeper than freebies, folks. Regina leaned forward, clasping her hands. Mr. Avery, we understand you may be upset and considering legal action. Before that, we want to hear how we can make things right. Marcus took a measured breath. I'll be frank. The culture that allowed this incident to happen needs an overhaul. That flight attendant felt so secure in her authority that she believed she could humiliate a black man in first class and face no consequences. I want to see real changes in your diversity and anti-discrimination training policies and accountability measures. Vanessa offered a tense smile. We completely understand. We've had robust programs in place, but we're willing to strengthen them. That's a start, Marcus replied, but I also want a seat at the table to ensure these changes actually happen. Doug looked puzzled. What do you mean exactly, Mr. Avery Marcus? Let silence fill the virtual room for a heartbeat. I mean, I want to purchase a substantial stake in Delta Airlines, and I want a position that allows me to influence these policies directly. Not just a token seat on a committee, actual influence. Vanessa and Doug exchanged glances, startled. Regina, the general counsel, studied Marcus carefully. How substantial a stake are you considering? Marcus felt adrenaline surge. 49%. Enough to be the largest minority shareholder without triggering a full takeover. Vanessa's eyes widened. Doug coughed into his fist, looking rattled. Regina's eyebrows rose, but her voice remained steady. That's a massive investment, Mr. Avery. The total valuation of Delta is in the tens of billions of dollars. We're not sure we can, Marcus, cut in. I'm aware of Delta's market cap, and trust me, I have the resources, or I can assemble them. This isn't just about me. I have a network of investors who share my vision for equitable treatment in the airline industry. Vanessa fumbled for words. That's quite unprecedented. Such a move would require board approval, a tender offer, and possibly regulatory scrutiny. Marcus nodded. I know, but if you're as serious about making this right as you say, then you'll hear me out. Because if you dismiss me, the next call I'll make is to my lawyers. And then this story will go viral in a way that tarnishes Delta's image for years. I don't want to destroy you. I want to transform you. Doug, the CFO, looked like he was choking. Regina placed a calming hand on her chest. Mr. Avery, we need time to consider this. Obviously, this is well beyond a standard complaint resolution. Marcus shrugged. Take your time, but not too long. I want a preliminary discussion today. If the board is open to exploring my offer, we can proceed. Otherwise, he paused, letting them imagine the nightmare. Vanessa regained her composure. We will call an emergency meeting with the board. It may take some time for them to convene. Marcus crossed his arms. I'll wait. James, who stood silently in the corner, looked on with awe. He had never witnessed such a high-stakes conversation unfold with such raw force. We appreciate your patience, Regina said. And on a personal note, I'm sorry you experienced this. We'll do our best to make it right. The screen went dark. Marcus exhaled. James gaped at him. You're really going to try to buy that bigger stake in Delta? Marcus stood. Watch me. Time was of the essence. Marcus had let corporate know his terms. Now he had to marshal the resources to back up his demand. He spent the next 2 hours calling his fellow investors big players in finance and tech who trusted his track record. He presented them with a bold proposition: pool their capital to buy a near-majority stake in Delta champion radical policy changes and turn the airline into a global example of equality and top-tier service. Some laughed outright, claiming it was too big of a bite. Others were intrigued, especially once they learned of the scandal. A few were outraged on Marcus's behalf. Investors with philanthropic hearts recognized the moral weight of the cause. Others saw potential business value in overhauling Delta's tarnished reputation and modernizing operations under a new visionary approach. Within hours, Lily and Angela were orchestrating a flurry of non-disclosure agreements and private Zoom calls. The synergy was electrifying. Meanwhile, back in Denver, word of the incident began to leak on social media. A passenger had posted photos of Marcus being escorted off the plane by airport police, describing the racist overtones. Retweets and shares multiplied. News outlets began calling Delta's press office. The meltdown had started, just as Marcus predicted. The airline scrambled to control the narrative, issuing vague statements about an unfortunate misunderstanding with a valued customer. By late afternoon, James Sutter approached Marcus in the lounge, once again phone pressed to his ear. His expression was both weary and relieved. "Mr. Avery, the board is convening an emergency session. They'd like you to present your case directly via video conference if you're willing." Marcus set down the iced coffee he'd been sipping. "I'm ready." James led him back to the same private conference room. This time, the screen showed not 3, but nearly a dozen faces, the majority of Delta's board of directors. Some had crisp suits and expensive haircuts. Others had the polished look of long-time corporate veterans. All wore expressions of intense curiosity and perhaps a hint of trepidation. The chairman, Gerald Rutherford, spoke first. "Mr. Avery, we've received some unusual news from our executive team. They say you wish to purchase up to 49% of Delta Airlines. That's an extraordinary claim. We'd like to hear your rationale." Marcus maintained a measured calm. He introduced himself, summarizing his background: angel investor, venture capitalist, philanthropic endeavors. He briefly recounted the humiliating ordeal on the plane. Then he explained his vision: how the airline industry needed a strong moral compass and modern leadership to adapt to changing social expectations. Discrimination. He said, his voice firm, is not a minor inconvenience. It's a poison that can kill consumer trust, attract costly lawsuits, and tarnish a brand's reputation. I believe Delta can lead the industry in stamping out such toxicity, but only if the leadership is committed to real change. And I want to help make that happen from the inside. The board members shifted in their seats. Some nodded gravely. A few seemed resistant, perhaps concerned about losing control. Gerald pressed his fingertips together. "We are, of course, dedicated to providing safe and inclusive environments for our customers. However, your proposal is financially and structurally massive. The board would need to weigh the implications carefully. Have you considered a smaller stake or a strategic partnership rather than near-majority ownership?" Marcus shook his head. "I need enough power to ensure reforms aren't just lip service. Many well-intentioned boards set up diversity committees that produce pretty brochures, but no results. I'm not here to be your figurehead. I'm here to be a force for actual improvement." A woman on the board, Dr. Cassandra Baldwin, cleared her throat. She was known to champion corporate social responsibility. "I admire your conviction, Mr. Avery. Still, to buy 49% of Delta, you'd need billions. Do you really have that kind of backing?" Marcus nodded. "I've already assembled commitments from investors in my network. If you open the books for due diligence, I'll show you proof of funds. We can talk synergy. We can talk about structuring the deal so it benefits current shareholders. Perhaps a stock buyback arrangement or a partial issuance. I'm flexible, but the end result is non-negotiable. I intend to be the largest minority shareholder with a seat on the board and real influence over Delta's direction. Murmurs spread through the faces on the screen. Gerald exchanged a glance with a few of his colleagues. We'll need time to deliberate. If it moves forward, you'll have to go through formal channels. Tender offers regulatory filings, but given the situation, we might expedite certain steps. Marcus relaxed slightly. I appreciate that. I'm also prepared for an alternative. I can buy shares on the open market until I reach my target. But that would create chaos and speculation. I'd prefer a negotiated arrangement. Gerald's stony expression softened. Understood. Let us discuss. We'll be in touch soon, Mr. Avery. The call ended, leaving Marcus in the conference room with James, whose mouth hung slightly open in astonishment. Marcus rose. Thanks for facilitating that. James bobbed his head. That was incredible. I've never seen anyone speak to the board like that. Marcus gave him a tight smile. Sometimes it takes a little turbulence to show people what's broken. Now let's see if they're really willing to fix it. The next few hours were a blur of high-stakes maneuvering. The board convened behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Hillary's name began trending on social media as an unverified leak identified her as the flight attendant at the center of the scandal. People demanded her termination, with many citing prior claims that she'd shown bias toward certain customers. The airline's PR team scrambled to manage the fallout. Marcus sat in the lounge, phone in hand, responding to journalists' inquiries with measured statements that promised a forthcoming resolution. He had no desire to humiliate the airline publicly if a constructive path existed. But if the board refused his offer, he would go scorched earth. The hours ticked by. Finally, at around 8 p.m. local time, James approached, face alight with excitement. They'd like you to board your original flight to Atlanta, that same aircraft, believe it or not, so you can meet with top executives in person upon arrival. The flight attendant has been removed. The pilot is expecting you. We have a seat saved in first class. Will you accept, or would you prefer another aircraft? Marcus considered the optics. Returning to the same plane might be the ultimate statement of triumph over adversity. I'll take it, he said. Boarding that flight felt surreal. Many passengers from earlier had already been reaccommodated or missed connections. The first-class cabin was half empty. Eduardo was there, visibly relieved to see Marcus return. The pilot, Captain Harris, stood at the door offering a stiff handshake. Mr. Avery, apologies for all that mess earlier, he said. I was just trying to keep the peace. Marcus nodded. I appreciate that, Captain. He took his seat, noticing that Hillary was indeed absent. Teresa, the older flight attendant, smiled ruefully at him. I'm glad you're back, she whispered. We're all shaken by what happened. Marcus gave a polite nod. He sat down, buckled up, and exhaled. The flight took off without incident this time. Eduardo provided exemplary service, and the flight was eerily quiet. Marcus tried to rest, but 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind. Could he really finalize a near-majority purchase of Delta? Would the board follow through, or was this a stalling tactic? He resolved to keep pushing, no matter how big the obstacles. They landed in Atlanta close to midnight local time. A private car awaited on the tarmac. Marcus was whisked away to Delta's corporate headquarters, where a handful of executives had waited in overtime to meet him, including CFO Doug Campbell and General Counsel Regina Carter. The building was largely empty. Lights dimmed, but the tension was palpable. They congregated in a large, glass-walled conference room, complete with an expansive view of Atlanta's skyline. Doug began with an exhausted smile. "Mr. Avery, thanks for coming at this late hour." Marcus set his travel bag aside. "Let's get to it." Regina gestured to some seats. They all sank into plush leather chairs. "We have good news. The board is willing to entertain a special negotiation to allow you to acquire a significant stake. Maybe not 49% right away, but they're open to a phased approach working up to that number. This is contingent on a set of conditions that protect Delta's current leadership structure." Marcus steepled his fingers. "I'm listening." Doug spoke, stifling a yawn. "To expedite, we could structure a private placement. You'd get newly issued shares priced at a slight premium to market value in exchange for an immediate seat on the board and a guaranteed path to increasing your stake over time with certain caps. The board just wants to ensure we don't lose majority control in one fell swoop." Marcus nodded. "Fine. I'll consider a phased approach, but my final stake can't be below 49%. I want enough leverage for real changes." Regina lifted a binder from the table. "We have a preliminary term sheet. Our lawyers and your lawyers can hash out details over the next few days or weeks. We also have a new draft policy on anti-discrimination training that we'd like you to review and possibly co-develop once you're on the board." Marcus leafed through the binder's pages, scanning bullet points. Terms: price per share. Vesting schedule board obligations. A leadership liaison role for him to oversee diversity initiatives. It was a start, but details would take time to finalize. "Good," Marcus said, finally. "This is what accountability looks like. I'll have my team go over these terms immediately. In the meantime, I want a formal apology from Delta publicly, not just for me, but for the community that sees this kind of prejudice every day." Doug and Regina exchanged glances. "We can arrange that," Doug said. "Our PR department can craft a statement for your review." Marcus nodded. "Great. Then we're done for now." He stood, shook their hands, and prepared to leave. Outside the headquarters, the night air was thick and humid. Marcus felt a storm of emotions swirl within him. Exhaustion, triumph, a sense of responsibility. This was more than a personal vendetta now. It was a chance to spearhead meaningful change in a global corporation. The path was uncertain, but he was all in. In the days that followed, social media buzzed with updates. News leaked that Marcus Avery had struck a deal to acquire a major stake in Delta. Public reaction ranged from admiration to skepticism. Pundits debated whether a single investor could reform the airline's culture, or if it was all a PR stunt. Meanwhile, Hillary found herself in the eye of a storm. She was placed on indefinite leave, pending termination. Reporters dug into her past, unearthing complaints from prior passengers of color who felt they had been treated differently by her. The airline's union tried to defend her, but the mounting evidence made it an uphill battle. She disappeared from public view. Marcus, for his part, tried not to revel in schadenfreude. Still, there was a sense of justice in seeing the real consequences of her actions. She had gambled that her authority would protect her from accountability. She was wrong. As the last echoes of her case played out in tabloids and legal documents, it became clear that she wouldn't easily find work in the airline industry again. But karma didn't stop with Hillary. Delta's leadership realized that to avoid potential lawsuits and massive public backlash, they needed to adopt a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Dozens of flight attendants were retrained, new compliance measures were enforced, and supervisors were directed to monitor these changes meticulously. Eduardo. The young flight attendant who had shown Marcus kindness found himself praised for his professionalism in the midst of chaos. He received a commendation and a promotion to a more senior position. Teresa, too, was recognized for trying to de-escalate tensions. The stories of these decent employees served as a reminder that not everyone in the system was broken, that some genuinely strove to do the right thing. Negotiations over Marcus's stake took several weeks. Lawyers bickered over share pricing, lock-up periods, and board seats. In the end, a press conference was called, culminating in an agreement. Marcus Avery, backed by a consortium of investors, would buy an initial 30% stake in Delta, with an option to increase it to 49% over the next 12 months. Marcus would serve on the board of directors, heading a newly formed Equity and Innovation Committee that reported directly to the chairman. The day of the signing, cameras flashed in a grand ballroom at Delta's Atlanta headquarters. Dozens of journalists gathered penning questions about how one man's confrontation with a flight attendant had led to this seismic shift. Delta's CEO Elaine Garner stood at the podium beside Marcus. They shook hands for the cameras, a symbolic show of unity. Elaine spoke first, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. Today marks a milestone in Delta's commitment to evolve as a global leader, not just in aviation, but in social responsibility and technological innovation. We welcome Mr. Avery's perspective and expertise with open arms. Marcus took the microphone. He scanned the crowd, saw Lily smiling near the front. Angela was there too. Arms folded, a proud glint in her eyes. He recalled the humiliating moment when Hillary demanded he remove his hoodie or get off the plane. How that moment of blatant bias had snowballed into a life-changing opportunity for both him and the airline. He cleared his throat, calm, but resolute. A few weeks ago, I was just a passenger sitting in first class, told that I didn't belong. Today, I stand here as an investor, a partner, and a board member committed to ensuring that no one else will face that same discrimination on a Delta flight or any flight ever again. This isn't just about a single flight attendant or a single airline. It's about creating a culture of respect and equity in the skies and beyond. Applause thundered through the room. Cameras clicked. The moment felt surreal and triumphant, proof that adversity could spark change. Proof that sometimes, when pushed too far, a person can push back so hard that entire systems start to shift. Over the ensuing months, Marcus rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He spearheaded programs to improve the passenger experience, from streamlined boarding processes to advanced bias training. He introduced pilot projects featuring mentorship programs for underrepresented youths seeking to become flight attendants or pilots. Delta also partnered with non-profits in underserved communities, encouraging young people to consider careers in aviation. Almost immediately, public sentiment began to shift. Some longtime customers were wary of change, but many new travelers flocked to Delta, inspired by the airline's progressive stance. Stock prices moved upward, rewarding the investors who had backed Marcus's vision. The board, initially anxious about ceding so much control, found that Marcus's forward-thinking approach generated tangible benefits, both in revenue and reputation. As for Marcus, he occasionally still wore hoodies on flights, partly to remind the world that success can come in any package, partly to honor his roots. And never again was he asked to remove his hoodie. Instead, flight attendants would smile, greet him by name, and ask if he needed anything. He couldn't help but think of Hillary sometimes, how a single moment of prejudice had cost her a career and triggered a corporate revolution. He took no personal delight in her downfall. If anything, he hoped she would learn and grow from this, realizing how destructive her beliefs had been. Karma had indeed struck, but it had also opened doors for positive transformation. Delta emerged not just as an airline, but as a beacon of inclusivity. Marcus's phone rang non-stop with other corporations asking for consultations, eager to replicate his success. He was no longer just a wealthy entrepreneur. He was a pioneer in corporate equity on a global stage. The hoodie that sparked it all hung in his closet at home in Los Angeles, a potent reminder that what the world sees as ordinary can become revolutionary in the right or wrong circumstances. Sometimes it just takes one spark to set a mighty blaze. Every flight holds the promise of a journey, but some journeys reshape entire industries. What began as a forced removal over a hoodie became a clarion call for change. Marcus's defiance against prejudice not only empowered passengers who silently endured indignities, it challenged an airline to question its own policies. Through unwavering determination and strategic brilliance, he went from being a wronged customer to a near-majority shareholder, proving that the best retaliation against discrimination is to dismantle its power structures from within. This isn't just a story of karma. It's a blueprint for how one person can use adversity as leverage to spark progress. If this story resonates with you, let's spread its message far and wide. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this with a friend who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Together, let's keep fighting for what's right.